Thanks very much indeed. Norman Smith there.
Well, let's cross to another of our studios in Westminster and speak to Emma Carr from the Civil Liberties campaign group Big Brother Watch. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. Your reaction to this?
Well, I think, first of all, from what was just said about why it's taken 3 months since the European Court of Justice ruling on the 8th of April to this point, the legislative process does not take that long. It wasn't a surprise, the ruling at the beginning of April, and the fact that it's been announced today and it's expected to be law by next Thursday means that members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords simply cannot do their job. They cannot scrutinise this bill sufficiently enough to ensure that it includes all of the safeguards that were set out by the European Court of Justice when they said that the last piece of legislation was in fact illegal. It was discriminatory in terms of our human rights. So they set out 10 clauses which they said would maintain a proportionate level of legislation, and there's absolutely no way that we can go through the current legislation that's being proposed and ensure that it's going to be meeting those criteria. So
you don't approve of the process. That is one criticism. What about the actual content? You just heard our contributor there saying there is nothing new here. This simply is a way of maintaining the powers the authorities currently have.
Well, there certainly is going to be new things in there because, as I've just said, the European Court of Justice ruled that the last piece of legislation was in fact illegal. It was disproportionate, so they're going to have to update that legislation to bring it in line with the Human Rights Act. So there will be new elements in there, and we'll have to go through those very carefully. But I think that one of the things that needs to be included in this legislation is extra transparency about the use of the record keeping around the use of communications data, and as we've just heard, it's incredibly important and it's used a lot during crime prevention and detection investigations, but there's very little record keeping about how many individuals that's applying to and what kind of offences. And as the Home Affairs Select Committee and the Interception of Communications Commissioner's Office have all said, better record keeping would lead to more public trust in the powers that have been given.
And the safeguards we've heard about already, with Parliament looking at this every year, with it being automatically deleted by 2016, is that not far enough?
Well, I need to have a look at the substance of the legislation, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. But I'm very much pleased to see that there's going to be the sunset clause. So at 2016, this legislation will cease to exist and new legislation will be brought in. But as I've previously said, I just don't think a week to scrutinise some pretty complex legislation is going to be enough to ensure that the safeguards really are in place.
Just a final word on just the fundamentals here, the need to do this. You accept there is a need to do this, do you? You heard the Prime Minister say innocent lives would be lost if we didn't. We all know about the threats. At some point, there is a line, isn't there, with civil liberties that has to be crossed, given what we're facing.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone's saying that this sort of legislation shouldn't exist. I think everybody in the crime agencies need to have access to communications data, but we need to ensure that that line is where it needs to be to allow the agencies to do their job, but to also ensure that people's privacy isn't being intruded upon unnecessarily.
OK. Emma Carr, thanks very much. Thank you.